Mixing without plugins? Seriously?
Yes, seriously, and I'm going to explain you why I do mix without any plugins when I start working on a new mix. But first, if you're new here on the channel, subscribe, click that notification bell so you don't miss anything, and for all of you, you know the drill, share and like this video. Now I have a free cheat sheet for you to download, 9 steps for a better static mix. The link is in the description or here on top. Now, mixing with no plugin is also known as working on a static mix or a balanced mix, meaning that you balance your tracks all together so everything makes sense and you don't worry about plugins. You don't have any plugins loaded. Now, the only thing that you're allowed to do in this case is working with your faders, your gain, pan, and some volume automation. So those are the tools that you can use when working on a static mix. Now, the reason why this is very important to work on a balanced mix, it just gives me, like on my side anyways, it gives me a better perspective and it gives me the big picture of the song I'm mixing, because I'm mixing in context from the beginning of the static mix to the end. Because there's no way I'm going to mix in solo. I'm not going to solo one track. I am going to work in context because I'm balancing all the tracks all together, and this is something very important. So it keeps my focus on the entire song opposed to only focusing on one track, and this is something that I like about starting my mix with a static mix. So I'm going to share with you all the steps that I do to work out a static mix. Once I'm done organizing my session, like we've seen in the last video, I'm going to leave the link on top if you didn't watch that video yet. Once this is done, I check my tracks to make sure everything is well gain staged. And if you don't know what gain staging is, again, I'm going to leave a link so you can check that out. It's going to be in the description down below or on top here. Also, what I do after gain staging, I check the phase, especially if I'm mixing live drums or any types of sources that are mic'd with several microphones, with more than one microphone. I want to make sure the relationship between the source and the microphones are in phase with each other, okay? And this is something that you need to check out, especially if you're working with live drums. Now, when all of this is done, I jump on the static mix. So let's jump in Cubase and check what we have here. Now, I already worked on this static mix, so that static mix is done, but I want you guys to look how my session looks like. Now, I'm using a template. I have my own mix template that I use, but all of my plugins are bypassed. Okay, as you can see here on top, I have like a bunch of plugins already in my template, but everything is bypassed. My effects channel tracks are muted, and all the faders are down anyways for all of my effects channel tracks. So the only thing that is playing on this session are the tracks, the channels, that's it. Now my mix buses, same here, I bypassed all of the plugins and I keep those channels at unity point. Now the channels, what I do with the channels faders, I start by bringing them all at 0, which is the unity gain point, and I bring everything down by maybe 5 or 6 dBs, okay, just to give me a bit of headroom. I want to stay near the 0 gain unity point of the fader when I'm mixing, just to get the most visual resolution possible, because I want to avoid having to mix my channels way down below, because at this point, at this level, you get a lot less resolution. It's a bit harder to mix, to do automation and stuff like that. So I'd rather keep everything near the 0 point to get better resolution. Now, don't panic if you're mixing a song and you end up with a channel that is way down the channel. It's not going to affect the sound of your mix. You don't have to worry about that, okay? The only thing is you're just going to have less resolution while mixing. That's it, okay? So I just tend to leave everything near the 0 point. So by bringing everything down by 5 or 6 dBs, it gives me a bit of headroom so I don't get to overload my channels, and I have a lot of room to work with. So there you go. So this is what I first do. I first balance all my channels to 0, -5, or 6 dBs. Then I put my session in mono. Okay, so if you're working with Cubase, what you can do with Cubase Pro, anyways, we have the control room, and on the control room you have a mono stereo button here that you can use to switch from mono to stereo. If you're not using Cubase Pro or you're using another DAW and you don't have that option in your DAW, now use a plugin. That doesn't matter. Okay, for this part, that doesn't matter. Load a plugin on your master bus, a plugin that you can switch from stereo to mono. Plugin Alliance has a free plugin that you can use. I forgot the name of the plugin. Actually, you know what? I have it right here. So let me show you what that plugin is. There you go, the BX Solo. So you can use the BX Solo, which is free if you want to switch from mono to stereo, and just activate that plugin. So mixing without plugins except for switching to mono, okay? That's fair. So I'm going to deactivate this plugin because I don't need it, and my session is now in mono. Now, I love mixing in mono when balancing my tracks for a static mix. I'm not a big fan on mixing in mono when I'm further down in the mix. I do check my mixes when I'm near the end of my mix in mono just to check if everything sounds okay. So I do jump from mono to stereo, but I usually just mix in mono at the beginning of the mix when working on the static mix. And my goal when mixing in mono is always to get the best mix, balanced mix possible. So when I jump into stereo and I add panning afterwards, everything sounds better. And if I have phase problems with some of my tracks, I'm going to know right away when mixing in mono. So there you go. So this is why I think it's important. And I think this is part of my workflow anyway. So I would encourage you to do the same, or at least try it out. Then what I do, I start by working on the drums as a whole, and I start by balancing the drums, and I mute all the other tracks in my session. All right, so let's check the drums. And what I usually do, I find the part in the song that is louder, that has a lot of energy, and this is where I'm going to start my static mix for the most part. So let's have a quick listen to what we have. Now, those are program drums. And, you know, very straightforward. Once I'm done balancing the drums, I just bring in the bass and so on. I usually do that one track at a time, okay? Now everything was already mixed, so that's why I just unmuted the group. But what I usually do is just bring one fader at a time and blend that out in the mix. So I do that for all the tracks, and then I just balance everything out to make sure everything sounds good in mono. Now, if I have some tracks that are louder than others, I can just bring down the fader or bring up the fader just to balance my tracks. But if I need to, let's say on one track, I just need to bring the fader way down because the signal is way too hot, or I need to bring it up by more than 15 or 20 dBs, in that case, I'm going to play with the gain, like you can see on top. That was done for the my gain staging, the gain staging part anyways, but if I need to, I'm going to still, when I balance my static mix, I am going to tweak the gain if I need to bring down my fader too much, because again, I want to avoid mixing down below the mixer, and I want to stay near the zero gain point. So if I need to bring down the gain, which is here on top in Cubase, that will affect the signal before the signal hits the faders. And then once I'm done with my balance in mono, I have a quick listen. All right, now I switch to stereo. And then I just work my panning. And this is something that is very, very cool because now your mix is going to open up. The mix is going to get way wider and it's going to sound pretty good actually. And this is going to help you to separate some of the tracks that are kind of cut in the middle. Even if you hear them well, they just need separation, and adding padding to your static mix is going to help a lot. Like for overheads, guitars, if you have like stacked guitars that you need to pan left and right, this is when I'm going to work on that. Same for back vocals, stacked back vocals. Those are all types of signals that I like to pan out and to leave the middle for the vocals, the kick, the bass, in the most part anyways. So this is what it sounds like once I'm done with my static mix. This is what I have right now with this mix. So pretty cool. Now, if I need to add some automation, I am not afraid to do it. Volume automation anyways, or panning automation if this is part of the mix I'm aiming to do. For example, and I talked about that before, especially on vocals. That will happen a lot on vocals, especially if I'm dealing with a dynamic vocal take, which is all over the place. Dynamic-wise, I am going to tweak the gain before the vocal hits the mixer. So I can actually just automate the gain knob or just clip gain a few events like I did right here. I did bring that part down just because it was a bit too hot compared to the rest of that event. And the goal for me when I do that on vocals is just to kind of manage the dynamic of the vocals before the vocal hits the plugins. Now, if you want to know more about that technique, check the video on top. I did a series on mixing vocals, and this is part of it. Okay, so the link is on top. Check it out if you want to know more about automation before hitting the plugins. All right. So this is something I do in the static mix as well. If I need to do automation, that can be on any channels that needs automation. So there you go. So this is basically what I do when doing a static mix. And afterwards, I listen to the song, listen to the mix, and I just take notes. I evaluate what needs to be done, what needs to be fixed, and what needs to be enhanced by using EQ or compression, and then what needs to have a bit more space so I can add some effects like reverb and delays and stuff like that. You know, what needs saturation and all of this stuff that comes afterwards. Then the last thing I do when I'm done with my mix, my balance mix, is I bounce my static mix back in my mix session as a reference track so I can get back to it later on during the mix, just to make sure that I'm improving the mix and not downgrading the mix. So getting back to the rough mix or the balance mix afterwards once in a while just to compare is something that I like to do. All right, guys, so this is it for today. Don't forget to download the free cheat sheet, 9 steps for a better static mix. Link is at the bottom in the description down below. And don't forget to share, to like, and to subscribe if you're new here on the channel. All right, guys, have a nice weekend, and I'll see you soon.